meetings like yesterday. I was in 10 hours of meetings,
Oof.
like 10:30 until 8 p.m.
That's intense. That's intense. That's what we
And
do. That's what we do.
yeah, well, I can't even do work though. If I'm in meetings with people, I have no time to work. So it's like I have all these client calls and stuff, and I'm like trying to actually get shit done. Um, but
Again,
anyway,
went live without checking the hair again. I take my headphones on and off all day, and it just like I'll turn it on and it'll just be poof. But we are back live on Tribe of Business Communities, Twitch, YouTube, and Discord. If you're watching on those channels, hop in the Discord, hang out with us. We love to meet you. We love to bring you within the folds of the Tribe of Fam. Get to know the people here. They're awesome. I mean, they're life changing, really. And our camera setup's all wonky today. Sorry about this, Twitch. I'll fix it in a second. But Garrett, you want to kick us off and get Philosophy
yeah,
Club
yeah,
underway?
it's the Christmas episode.
Woo!
I don't know what that means. I was thinking about what I'm pretty sure I've talked about every Christmas episode. We're not going to do that again, which is that most Christmas traditions are related to mushrooms. But we did that last year, and we probably did that the year before too. So,
I imagine. I'm pretty sure last year we were like, we talked about this last year, but
yeah,
so let's not get
yeah,
into shrooms
I
again
know
this
we've
year.
done it at least once. We probably did it both times. So,
Oh no. Well,
let's
now be don't get him started on the shrooms. Be
no, yeah, no. I'm trying to think.
I will
What's a
server
good
mute
one?
you again.
You know what? What we can start with because it's hilarious. I'm gonna read. I've been telling everybody this because I learned it
Oh
about the
wait,
Yule lads.
I forgot to do my intro. Welcome to Philosophy Live Stream. Today we'll be discussing the power of philosophical thought and how it can help us better understand the world around us.
I don't
Garrett's
know.
To kick
I
off
don't
our
know about
discussion,
that.
let's take a look at a quote from the famous philosopher Socrates. He said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." This is a famous dictum that he supposedly uttered when he was at his trial for impiety and corrupting the youth. So, you know, he was subsequently sentenced to death, but I think he made a really good point that exploring things even outside of your comfort zone is important, and Garrett's really good at that. He's good at putting really complicated ideas into simple words so that you can understand and think about them. Broaden your perspective and then narrow in. I mean, that's the same idea with the design process: is expand your horizons and then converge on what you believe, what you really find at the center of your mission and your vision for your life. And that applies to business, your brand, whatever you're trying to accomplish. You want to make sure you have clarity on it. So examine it. Garrett does examinations. He's a doctor of branding and philosophy, so you can always get your free exam. Uh, Hit him up on Discord
A
or
metaphorical doctor.
a metaphorical
Just to be
doctor.
clear,
Yes, he's not
I
an
play a
actual
doctor
doctor.
on TV. Yes. Um, so we're gonna start with this, and then I'm gonna jump into some other stuff. So, um, we're gonna talk for the Christmas episode content about Icelandic Christmas folklore, which is fucking hilarious. So, okay.
Oh, this will
So
be
in
good.
Iceland, where Christmas is much more metal, obviously most modern metal derives from stuff in Scandinavia. If you listen to like Meladeth, that comes from Sweden. Like anyway, so they have for Christmas some things that you might want to keep an eye out for. One of these is Grilla, a giantess with an appetite for the flesh of mischievous children. She will cook them in a large pot. Her husband, Lepaludi, I don't know how to pronounce that. It's got the weird D with the cross over it. Is lazy and mostly stays at home in the cave. There is the Yule cat, which is a huge and vicious cat who lurks around the snowy countryside during Christmas and eats people who have not received any new clothes um, before Christmas Eve. So make sure you get some new clothes. If you don't, you will be eaten by the Yule cat. But the best part of Icelandic Christmas is the Yule lads, who are the giants' children. They have a bunch of very funny names and they do a bunch of very funny things. So I'm going to read these to you. So I'll read the English translations because I'm not going to be able to pronounce any of this stuff. But the first one is Sheepcoat Clod. He harasses sheep, but is impaired by his stiff peg legs. Gullygawk hides in gullies, waiting for an opportunity to sneak into the cowshed and steal milk. Stubby is abnormally short. He steals pans to eat the crust left on them. Spoon licker steals and licks wooden spoons, but he's extremely thin because he's malnourished. Um, Pot scraper steals leftovers from pots. Bowl licker hides under beds, waiting for someone to put down a bowl with a lid instead of a dish, which he then steals. Door slammer likes to slam doors in the middle of the night. Skier gobbler has a great affinity for skyr, which is like yogurt. It's Icelandic yogurt. Sausage swiper hides in the rafters and snatches sausages that are being smoked because I don't know about you, but I definitely have sausages being smoked in the rafters of my house.
Oh man.
Um, Window peeper likes to look through windows in search of things to steal. Doorway sniffer has an abnormally large nose and an acute sense of smell, which he uses to locate leaf bread. Meat hook uses a hook to steal meat. And candle stealer follows children in order to steal their candles, which were once made of tallow and are thus edible. So
Edible.
I don't like I don't know what the fuck we do for Christmas, but this is much cooler. I would much prefer this. It's just I don't know how people come up with this stuff, but like it's very funny.
Probably
I
was
don't know.
that one dude who was just up in the rafters stealing meat,
Yeah,
smoked
just
meats
like,
with
oh,
a
I'm gonna
hook.
blame this on these little Giants kids. Um, at any rate, so there's our Christmas episode content. I don't really
Yeah,
have a lot of other Christmas stuff to cover, but there
so
you
much
go.
better than Elf on a Shelf.
Yeah, I want Yule ads causing
Yule
chaos,
lads in a.
and the Yule cat is eating people with no clothes. Okay, cool. So what we'll talk about today, because I've been reading this book. I have barely read any books in the last 2 years. I just have been busy and I haven't managed to finish stuff. So I have like a big stack of stuff that I'm like halfway done reading over here. But I'm reading this book now, which is called A Field Guide to Earthlings, which is a
Huh.
book about neurotypical people written from the perspective of an autistic person. And it's awesome. It's fascinating. It's really, really good. Basically, the structure of the book is like the author wrote this play that has a bunch of characters who are like, there's a wedding coming up. There's one of the people's is dating this chick who's a real estate developer, and the real estate developer is about to demolish the house where the wedding is going to be held. And so we haven't gotten to the part where that happens yet, but it's like just basically he'll go through a scene and then he'll explain all the people's behaviors from the like to as if he's explaining it to an autistic person because the author is autistic, and it's like fascinating. It's like 78 concepts that they broke down all of like normal human behavior into, and it's like all very like analytical and stuff. So it's very cool. It'd be kind of it's kind of like 48 Laws of Power for autists, but not power related, right? Um, but it's interesting because there's some of the stuff that I've written about that they talk about from a different angle. One of the things that they talked about that I thought is really really interesting is basically one of the core differences, one of the first things they say in the book, that's the difference between autistic people and neurotypical people, is that for the average person, for a neurotypical person, right, their mental concepts. So if you say like America would be a good example of this, right? Um, their average concepts are like a cup full of water that has small holes in it. And so they leak meaning over time, but they can't fill up the concept with meaning themselves. So they need social reinforcement from other people to reinforce the cup, to add meaning back to the concept, right? So, for example, um, with one of the things that's a big difference between neurotypicals and autistics is autistics, if they're friends with you 10 years ago and you never talked to them, and then you meet up again, then they'll start talking to you like they saw you yesterday, right? Like, and that's just normal for them. Whereas neurotypical people, if they don't talk to you for 10 years, then you basically become a stranger to them, right? And so it's kind of the same thing. So if you said like America, and in America, everybody's constantly adding in this reinforcement. Like, it would depend. If you're on the right, it'd be like America's greatest country on earth. If you're on the left, it's like America's perpetrating war crimes all the time, right? or whatever, right? Or America's racist, or any number of America's sexist, all kinds of stuff, right? But these are socially reinforced. So one of the examples, Nikola Tesla, who I would bet, solid money was probably autistic. Nikola Tesla, because he is at least in a loose sense, he's not neurotypical. He's clearly got a different brain than normal people do, right? Um, when he makes concepts, or any autistic person makes concepts, they can fill up or drain the cups of meaning themselves. These are like semantic concepts of meaning, right? So autistic people might be really interested in snails, right? And so for them, they're able to put meaning in this cup that's called the concept of snails, right? So they're like looking at snails and they know all these weird facts. But if the average person is like, oh, snails are sticky, snails are gross, right? Then when they talk to each other, they're reinforcing this concept, which is shared meaning that snails are gross. And so they don't ever learn more about it, right? If for whatever reason snails became really popular, then all the neurotypical people would probably know all kinds of stuff about snails because it's socially reinforced. So everyone's like, oh, did you learn your fact about snails today? They're like, oh, yes, Jim, I did. It turns out snails do this, right? They're like, haha, that's a good one, you know?
Memes in a nutshell.
Right, but that, yeah, literally it's memetics, right? But this is it's a different angle on memetics, so it's really interesting, right? So basically, one of the things they talk about, and this is fundamentally the difference between Tesla and Edison, right? Edison was probably neurotypical. He wasn't, he's not an idiot. He was a smart guy. He's kind of a bastard. If you hear the story of the two of them and all the shitty stuff that Edison did, and he like stole people's ideas and stuff. But Edison knew how to play the social game, and he understood that you have to like win people over to get them to understand new ideas. You can't just tell people them because there's no social reinforcement for the cup, right? So basically, this explains why ideas in society take a really long time to be adopted, even if they're right already, right? You can think about the example I love to give actually is the invention of the light bulb. I have an article about this that I'll share in the chat called the candle maker's fallacy. That's
Yes, I've heard this
basically,
one before.
yes, this is one of my better business articles from before I started writing business articles. But basically, if you were a candle maker in 1800, right? 100 years from now, 100 years from the year of 1800, everyone in the world is going to like know what light bulbs are, or everyone in the Western world, it's different than it is now. There's no internet, right? But if you're a candle maker in 1800, you run a candle company, you're the biggest candle company in the world, right? You have infinite money, infinite time. You have 100 years. You have the power, you have the market, you have all the resources and everything. Why is it that the people who had the candle companies did not, in 100 years, invest in light bulbs, research light bulbs, adopt light bulbs, whatever? And now candle companies only exist to do really weird niche stuff. So either they're smelly candles or they make candles for churches, and that's pretty much it. Like if you or you make tea lights or something, right? Um, so you look at what light bulbs and electricity looked like in 1800. It was like there was nothing. There were people who were just like playing with electricity. They barely had any use for it. They couldn't get electric lights to work at all. You're a candle company, you say this is bullshit, this is nothing, right? You fast forward to 1850, so we're halfway there, right? At this point, nobody has made electric lights work. It's 50 years of nothing. There's been experiments, they've worked on filaments and all this kind of stuff, still doesn't work, right? You look at this, you say, oh, it's bullshit. You fast forward to like 1875 or something, very close to light bulbs working if they aren't already. I forget the date off the top of my head, but now you're 75% of the way there. And you could look at these and be like, yeah, they're probably going to figure this out at this point. So if you're a candle company, you could still invest in the thing that's going to kill you in 25 more years, right? But nobody did, and nobody does. This isn't how people work. So fast forward another 10 years, Edison's figured out the incandescent bulb. Fast forward another 10 years, they've lit up the first cities. And you get to 1900 and like lights are everywhere, right? It hockey sticks. It goes very, very rapidly to widespread adoption. So that whole idea is kind of related to how concept adoption happens, right? You have this idea that people had that you could have electric lights 100 years before they ever happened, right? But if you talk to any of the people that were interested in it at that time, it wasn't Edison then. It was like probably probably autistic people, right? Probably super nerdy people that were obsessed with electricity, all this kind of stuff, right? There's no social reinforcement of these concepts to make people interested because it's not, people learn from others unless they're autistic, then they can learn on their own in a different way. But the average person is getting reinforcement from other people that this might be a good idea. And there's a spectrum. Some people, this is called the adoption curve, right? um it's like some people are really easy to convince of new technologies because they understand them. Some people are interested in being early, so they adopt from the people who are ahead of the curve. Some people are more ahead of the curve than others, but they really wait until there's some hype going on. And then some people only adopt ideas because they can't do the old ones anymore, right? This There's a really good version of this. I have the pencil model in there actually. I'm gonna find a pencil model graph for you because I'm kind of abbreviating this article and I'm gonna riff on it a little bit. But
So essentially, it seems like the spectrum is neurodiverse people or autistics that can communicate their point, or reinforce their point socially, are the ones that are creating the innovations on a societal level, and the ones that understand probably the best but aren't able to communicate very well socially are probably way ahead of the adoption curve.
yes, yeah, effectively that. So this is the thing. Here, the easiest example of this to understand is Galileo, right? So Galileo says the Earth is round, right? The Greeks knew the Earth was round thousands of years before this happened. By the way, there's a guy who figured out that the Earth was round because there's a place that's on the Tropic of Cancer near the equator, where they had this hole dug in the ground, and on a certain day of the year, the sun would shine perfectly in that hole, and there were no shadows, right? But where he lived, it was like 5,000 stadia away, or whatever, however far away north, right? And so what he did was he put a stick on the ground on that day, and measured the angle of the shadow of the stick, and then use the difference in the angle to calculate the diameter of the Earth to within like 1%. Like, and this is,
Freaking genius.
insane shit, right? So people actually always, people have known the Earth was round for a long time, and they were able to prove this long before it was ever adopted in the West. But it's a crazy thing to think because you have to imagine, like, let's put ourselves in the shoes of somebody who lives in like the 14 or 1500s, right? Everybody assumes that the earth is flat and the sun revolves around the earth because you'd be coming up in like this really heavily Catholic society where it's like, well, God laid the firmaments and split the heavens from the earth and yada yada yada. So everyone in everyone alive will agree that this is true because this is what they're told, right? So you have to like put yourselves in the shoes of, you can think, we'll play this game a little bit later, but like think about things right now that everyone agrees on, and imagine if you were going to challenge those things, like what kind of responses you would get from people, right? Look at like the vaccine, right, where the vaccine has a lot of side effects and it's not perfectly effective, and they said, oh, you'll need one dose, oh, you'll need two, oh, you need five, oh, you need doses for the rest of your life. Oh yeah, now these kids are having heart attacks and shit, right? If there were people who said at the beginning of COVID when they were talking about this, they're like, this is untested technology. There's going to be side effects. Healthy people probably don't need to take this because whatever. And you were treated like an asshole. You were treated like a criminal, right? And so you can imagine that similar kind of social like control behavior, the socially reinforcing narrative where if everyone believes what the experts say, then you're not an expert, so you're not allowed to question it. And who are you to you don't trust science, blah blah blah. It's the same exact shit that happened to Galileo, right? It was just 500 years ago. So instead of saying you don't trust the science, you're like, you don't trust the church. You're arguing with God. You're a piece of shit. And they put him under house arrest, right? Even though he's right. So it's important to understand this because this is like one of the most, I think this kind of socially reinforced concept development, or like social reinforcing of beliefs. If you understand that, you understand almost everything about how people work, right? At scale. There's a, I believe it's a Gandhi quote or it's misquoted, and it was somebody else, but I think it was Gandhi. Most people think it's a Gandhi quote. So it's socially reinforcing behavior. That means it's Gandhi. But first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. That quote is actually describing this whole thing that we're talking about. We're talking about the adoption curve. We're talking about socially reinforcing behavior. That process is the same exact thing, right? If you're an innovator, they ignore you. You're not relevant. If you're in the early adoption stage, they laugh at you. Look at how many people make fun of like crypto and stuff. And frankly, there are a lot of shitty crypto projects. So that's not a defense of the whole space, right? Then they fight you. Well, now we're getting to the place where they're trying to regulate it. They're trying to do all the shit. And then I don't know, give it 5, 10 years. It's going to be the normal thing. It's the future, right? So I'm gonna pause there. I'm gonna try and read through. I was completely ignoring the comments because I was on a roll. But let's see what we got. Oh, what is a neurotypical person? That's really important. So I should have said that at the beginning. So
Wait, I
um,
just have one from the Twitch that says, I wrote a book on reverse psychology. Please don't buy it. I just thought that was good.
that's great. That's great. So the first question: what is a neurotypical person? So neurotypical is a word that people came up with in because they're trying to like destigmatize you basically historically autistic, people see it as a bad thing. um, there are a bunch of different words that people use now where there's like autistic and you have Asperger's, which is also, people say that's high functioning autism, but they don't say high functioning anymore because it implies that people who are autistic are bad or something. There are certainly non-functional autistic people, so I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's not politically correct at this point to say. So neurotypical would mean you have a normal brain, which is kind of stupid because it's just a more complicated way of saying normal. And when I say normal, as opposed to when you think normal, you think that people things that aren't normal are probably bad, right? If you say you're not normal, your first response, because our social concept of the word normal is normal equals good. Normal doesn't always equal good, right? And unnatural, abnormal, whatever doesn't always equal bad, right? But the social concept says normal equals good. So when you're talking to neurotypical people and you say you're not normal, they're going to say here normal equals not normal equals bad, and they're going to say you're saying I'm a bad person because that's how they think, right? If you're talking to an autistic person and you say you're not normal, they'll be like, yeah, probably not, because they're just like, yeah, I've had these experiences throughout my life and I realized now I'm probably not a normal person, right? Normal, if we're talking about math, we're talking about the way that I use it, we have a normal distribution. So if you look at that adoption curve graph that I posted in the chat, the adoption curve is a normal distribution or a bell curve, right? There are two graphs that explain everything in the world. I'm saying, maybe there's some other graphs that explain stuff too, but these two work for most things, which is normal distributions or bell curves, and power law distributions or Pareto distributions, which are hockey stick curves, right? And I will post those in the chat as well. Um, so a normal distribution means that if something follows a normal distribution, then most things are going to be in the middle 68%. So IQ is a really good example. IQ, regardless of what, like how you, regardless of the group of people, if you have 100 people, on average, they're going to fall on this spread, right? I'm going to post this graph. This graph's going to be really, no, I'm going to post a simpler one. That was too confusing. So they have a bunch of math symbols and shit that I don't understand or care to explain. So out of any normal group of people, if we're talking about like IQ, for example, the average person is 100 IQ. 100 in IQ doesn't mean anything except that it's the average. It's the middle of the group, right? So when they've been doing IQ tests for 100 years now, technically everyone in the world is like 35 IQ points smarter than they were 100 years ago, because people, for whatever reason, are smarter now than they used to be, according to the IQ test. This could be because people are better at taking tests. It could be because people have better access to food or something. Nobody knows. It's debated, right? I think it's probably because they're better at taking tests. But no matter what group of people you have, if you test 100 people, the person in the middle is the benchmark, and that's what 100 means. It means perfectly average, right? 100 doesn't mean anything except average. Your normal distribution then means when you go above the average, you're getting smarter. Below the average, you're getting dumber. If it's less intelligent, is probably more politically correct, right? Um, but it's a relative measurement. If you had one person on an island, you wouldn't be able to say what their IQ is because it's relative to what. You could give them an IQ test, but if you had a universe that had only one person in it, their IQ would be 100 because they're the only person there. They're the middle, right? So most human things fall in this distribution. Most people, you have a very small number of people on the far right that are really good at something, a very small number of people on the far left that can't do it at all. And then the people in the middle, most people are, they're okay. If it's a complicated thing, they probably won't be able to do it. But so I'll show you the other graph, which is a power law distribution. A power law distribution is also called the hockey stick. Actually, here's one with both. So this will be helpful. Power law distributions, the Pareto principle is this idea, if you've ever heard 80-20 before, 80% of people do 20% of the work, 20% of people do 80% of the work. Basically, because you have that bell curve, and there's some people on the right who are wildly intelligent, those people are going to be much more effective on average. So if you have 100 coders, 80% of those coders are going to be fine or bad, right? And then 20% of those coders are going to be amazing. And you can do multiple levels of this, where if you take that 20% on the top and look deeper, there's a 20% of that 20% that are just stupidly good, right? These are like people that can program a whole computer themselves, right? Whereas the average coder can't do that at all. They can do specific tasks and specific scenarios and stuff, right? So it's important to understand all this stuff because marketing, sales, business, and stuff in general, you're not really, unless you're selling something super complicated, which probably nobody here is selling anything that complicated, you're generally trying to sell to normal people, to people who are on either side of that distribution, right? 70% of people are normal as far as we're concerned. They're plus or minus one standard deviation from the middle, which means 15 IQ points. And so this is hard because if you're Tesla, well, Tesla was selling stuff that's super complicated, right? Like, hey, guess what? I can make free energy. People don't even know what electricity does in in a useful way at this point. He's like, oh yeah, I could just like beam electricity through the earth and use the earth, and the atmosphere is like a big conductor, and it'll be free for everyone. It's like there's no way you're going to sell that. There's no way anyone's going to understand that because not only do they not get it, but no one they know gets it either. And that's the way that ideas move. Ideas are contagious, right? Not all ideas are contagious, but ideas that are effective are contagious, and they spread from person to person, and they get stronger the more people believe in them. That's the basis of memetics, right? Memes. So it's interesting when we're looking at this stuff with autism because you have people that are basically able to pioneer, but the price is that they're really not super socially functional because the thing that makes you socially functional makes it hard for you to be a pioneer, right? It's a trade off. So if you're really good at the social environment, you think in your head, all of the cups full of meaning that you have in your head, the concepts, are the same as everyone else's. And you know what everyone thinks, and you can speak without offending people. You can speak in a convincing way because you have a shared conceptual map. You have a shared kind of like collective understanding of the world, right? But the price of that is that thinking of new things is really hard because you have the same cups as everyone else does. If you're somebody who can make their own cups and fill them up yourself, you're the snail guy. Maybe the snail guy figures out how to cure cancer because he like learned something about a snail cell that's like really unique. And a normal person is like, oh, snails are gross. Everyone agrees, right? I'm not going to do that. So you see where it's tricky. Now, the snail guy can come and say, hey, guess what? Snails are amazing. If you just like lick a snail, it's going to cure cancer or something. They're going to be like, no, snails are gross. You're a crazy person. Why are you licking snails? I've never seen anyone lick snails, but I know they're gross and everyone else says they're gross. So if you lick them, you're gross, right? There you go. Now, that guy cured his cancer. Everyone else has cancer, but they say, not, fuck the snail guy, right? But when people get into certain states where they're more desperate or receptive, then they can start trying to look for different answers. But look at the health guidelines for food, right? They're like, hey, eat 8 or 11 servings of pasta a day and bread, and you'll be healthy. It's like, what the fuck? That's not how anything works, right? All right, so I'm going to go through some more questions. Let's see. I tend to fight the trends and make my own. Does that make me autistic? I don't. I wouldn't. Autism is a spectrum, right? So there are people who are perfectly neurotypical on one side, which would be the most normal person you can think of. You just think average Joe as an archetype is that guy. He's completely not autistic. He's completely neurotypical. He uses the same words as everyone else. He has the same concepts as everyone else. He's probably a very normal Republican or a very normal Democrat. Depends on how he was brought up, right? And on the other end of the spectrum, you have someone like Rain Man, who has his own internal language, his own internal cups that are so specific that he can do fucking all the math in the world in his head, but he can barely communicate with people because he doesn't have shared cups with them, right? What concepts are, what these cups of meaning are, if you have your own map, you have your own set of cups, then you can't relate to anyone. Because if I imagine if all the definitions for all the words in my head were different than in yours, we would never be able to discuss anything, right? The point of words, the point of humans are social beings, words represent concepts and concepts represent reality, right? So if we use a word to represent different concepts, we're going to disagree. And a lot of stuff, if you've been here long, you'll have heard me talk about this a lot. But if you ever look at like older philosophy or like religious texts and stuff, religions and philosophies and groups all split up because they start diverging on the words, right? So what almost all Christianity is a good example because there's so many little sects, but their sects will split because they just have one semantic difference about this one verse or something like that. And that's how society evolves, because you have different people trying out different concepts, different definitions. But it's problematic because look at like Ireland and Northern Ireland, where they had a civil war over these sectarian differences, right? um Concepts are reality for people, right? There is a reality beyond the concepts, but we engage with that reality through concepts. You can say tree and I can say tree, and because we both know that we're talking about the concept of a tree, the same cup, then we can all work together on that. But if I say tree and I'm thinking of like a bush, right, or a rock, and I'm wrong, or my concept is different, then I'll say, oh, trees are stupid. They're not even green. And then you'll look at me and say, that guy is an idiot. What is he talking about, right? I mean, sure, there are some trees that aren't green, but like most trees are green. And when we're talking about this social idea of a tree, it's pretty much, you imagine like a generic tree, maybe an apple tree or something, right? So you can see where having different cups for these concepts causes problems. Now just imagine if all your cups were different and you start to get an idea of how autistic people work. But so it's not just about the cups, right? You have social behaviors, body language stuff. They typically, autistic people have, they may not be able to read behaviors as well, or body language, or subtext, or tone. And so, like, if I say, I'm talking to Sam and I say, I'm trying to think of something funny. It was like, what's a good example of something that people could say with two different meanings? Somebody throw one at me. That's a meaning based on tone or inflection or body language,
I've
right?
heard it both ways.
What do you mean?
I, I don't know. It's an
Oh, yeah,
expression.
yeah, yeah. Where I've heard it, like where
Or yeah, right.
you have,
Yeah, right.
yeah, that's a better example. Yeah. So, yeah, right. Like I say right all the
Yeah,
time in my
right.
words. So I always say that. But if you say yeah, right, That clearly means something different, right? And there's this there's actually two cups that exist for that. There are two concepts based on that word, and there's another cup, or actually probably two more cups that are the tone, right? So autistic people tend to be pretty literal. So they have a problem with tone and sarcasm and subtext and all these things. So you say, yeah, right. They're like, oh, they agree with me. They probably don't get, they're like, yeah, right, dumbass, right? Like they probably don't hear that part. So it makes it very complicated because it's something about thinking super literally that lets them understand the conceptual world better and makes it hard for them to understand the social world as much. But they're trade offs. So I'm going to post another graph, and I'll probably talk about this in a little bit, but I want to answer some more questions before we do that. Um, this is a graph. I'll just briefly cover this, but um, objective sanity. Let's say if I see a tree and I know it's a tree, that's great. If nowadays people have plastic trees and all kinds of stuff. Um, if you look at a plastic tree and you say that's a tree, technically you're wrong. I mean, we can all agree, oh, it's supposed to be a tree. We pretend like it's a tree, but it's not a tree, right? Social sanity over time, which is the plastic tree is a tree, moves away from objective sanity. The social environment gets more wrong with time because everybody misunderstands words and they misuse stuff and they accept what other people say and they just kind of accept little lies and little diversions from reality. So they move apart. So here's that graph. I wanted to touch on um, Kamal asks, "Can you find out what kind of person I am by asking me questions?" Depends on how you want to do that. Maybe you could take personality tests, and that's their theory is that they can find out what kind of person you are. Um, I think the most basic questions are like, do you feel comfortable in an average group setting talking about small talk, and do you understand the purpose of small talk?
Yeah, I would say I do.
Okay, then you're probably not autistic, right? Autistics don't like small talk and they don't understand that the purpose of small talk is to make assessments about the other person and whether they're normal or not, right? People see small talk as a big waste of time. I personally don't care for it, but I also talk about philosophy all day, so I'm probably on the spectrum. I don't know. But it's that would be a big indicator. Other like weird repetitive behaviors, being super organized or organizing your things to like obscene levels. There's a lot of stuff like that. Um, yeah, we don't say Asperger's anymore unless self-identifying.
Um,
I would probably have Asperger's in that definition, but um, let's
well,
see, personal.
I'm not super organized. That's one thing.
I
So
mean, do you have any things that you're obscenely interested in that the average person is not interested in at all?
yeah, and I like to code,
You like to what?
to program. I do a lot of Python and stuff, PHP. Like
Okay.
I got
That's
interested
I
in
don't
that.
think Yeah, I don't think that's a totally abnormal interest, although I would say there's probably a higher degree of autism in coding because coding is very like conceptual and independent work, but it would not be enough to say, there are certainly people that know how to code that aren't autistic. So I don't think that's a clear cut. Um, Samantha says, I notice in game development, there's usually an outgoing person that does all the networking and extrovert activities, and the other member is usually carrying out most of the development. Yes, that's very common. The best example of this is Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. If you know Myers-Briggs, Steve Jobs is a ENTJ. Steve Wozniak is either an INTP or an ENTP. That's a normal pair. Like ENTJ, INTP tends to team up, and then INTJ, ENTP tends to team up. But you have this kind of balance. If anyone's ever read the book Freak the Mighty, I was just thinking about this the other day. I had to read this for Battle of the Books or something in middle school, but it's like you have this like big kid who's like he's like huge, and he's just real simple minded, right? And then there's this little kid that has like cerebral palsy or something where he's like tiny and he's really sickly, but he's a genius. And so they end up being friends, and the little kid sits on the big kid's shoulders and they call themselves Freak the Mighty. It's very cute. It's a very sad book, but it's very cute. And so that's kind of how it works. You have to balance your shit out, right? There are, people have natural kind of roles that they play in the social environment. One of the theories I've heard is that autistic people were naturally solo hunters, which is unusual because humans are social hunters. So you'd have a group of people that would go team up, and you have to work together and kill like a fucking boar or something, right? A woolly mammoth. But autistics would be the ones that would like track the motion of the animals and learn all these weird little details about their behavior and their sense, and like build traps and think of other clever stuff, which I think is interesting. I think probably most early inventors were probably autistic because a normal person, a neurotypical person, would not think of those things. They would just do what everyone else is doing, which is just take stick, poke bear, right? Um, so let's see. Who made these cups? Who made these cups? Oh, that's a fantastic question, AJ. That is a great question. These cups are basically, they're negotiated, right? So there's a thing that happens. Let's say this is most obvious if you have a group of three people. Um, in there's a three-person dynamic that is kind of this is the basis of social interaction, right? It's different with two people because two people can just agree to be on the same page, but if you have three people, then you have the opportunity to get overpowered in a group setting at any given time, right? So the first person can propose something to the group. They'll say, hey, did you watch that movie? The second person can either agree and amplify that and say, yeah, that sounds great, or no, I haven't seen it, but I really want to, I heard it was good. And the third person, as a result, is more likely to go along with the first two people because now they're outnumbered, right? This is like the basis of how it works. So if you have a dominant person, they can introduce cups. If you have someone that doesn't know what they're doing, they can also introduce cups, but they might easily get overpowered. If you say, hey, man, I heard licking snails cures cancer, and the other two people are like, wow, that sounds dumb. And the third person says, you seem like a weirdo, right? Because now you're outnumbered. So it's like, I think concepts are originally generated by people who are on the fringes of society, right? If you live in the middle of society, you don't come up with your own cups. You're getting them from other people. Or maybe you have some kind of weird, super specific experience, and that forces you to try and understand something you've never experienced before. But most often, people will just write shit off. If you saw something that looked like a UFO and you don't know what a UFO is, you'd be like, "Oh, it's a shooting star," or like, "Oh, my mind is playing tricks on me," because your brain, the neurotypical brain, needs that social reinforcement to say this is valid or this is invalid, right? And you don't want to come off as a crazy person because a neurotypical person typically understands that, hey, this is something that's not normal. If I say this, I'm going to seem crazy, right? But then you have people that don't care about seeming crazy. And I think that's the value of the autists here, is because the autistics are like just going to tell you to lick the snail, right? They're just going to say, oh, yeah, I've been tracking the movement of these celestial bodies and I saw something move. And actually, it turns out at that velocity, it executed a 90-degree turn. And that's not something you could see out of a shooting star. So it's UFOs, right? And they're going to sound like a lunatic. And then everyone's going to call them crazy, but they're also not going to change their mind because they don't have socially reinforced beliefs like that. So they're going to be like, oh, well, everyone's dumb and I'm right. And now I'm an outcast or a pariah, right? And that slowly pushes society forward because eventually someone will agree with them. And once that second person amplifies it, it makes it easier for a third person to come in. So this is where there's a wonderful, wonderful video I'm going to share with you. It's one of the two best TED Talks of all time. It's called First Follower Theory, Lessons from the Dancing Guy. And this explains all of the shit that we just talked about even faster than I could explain it. So basically, I'm going to narrate this for anyone who doesn't want to watch the video, although you should at some point afterwards. There's a music festival. You would think everyone would dance at a music festival, but there aren't people dancing. They're just sitting on a hill. One crazy person gets up and starts dancing like a total idiot, right? He's like whipping around and doing stupid, like not even normal dance moves. And he just does this by himself for a while. And then eventually a second guy comes along. The second guy comes along and starts dancing like an idiot too. And because he's amplified that first person, he's giving people social validation. So shortly after the second guy comes, there's a third one and a fourth one. And now it's socially acceptable to dance, even though everyone came to a fucking festival to dance, presumably, right? And then everybody jumps in and then they have a mosh pit in like 2 minutes, right? That's how it works. That's the adoption curve. it works at the same speed. You could probably track this with math if you knew how to do it. But basically, it's that, you have innovators, early adopters, early majority, middle majority, late majority, and then detractors, or people who don't want to do it. And it goes at that rate. It takes a long time to get the first one, then you get the second one, then you start getting people really fast, and you're there. And then anybody who wasn't going to dance isn't going to dance once everyone's dancing, right? So socionics fans. Oh, I don't understand socionics. Sorry. Samantha's an INFP. Samantha, I'm going to add the INFP role to you. We have actually all the Myers-Briggs roles on Tribo. We just don't use them that often. My girlfriend's also an INFP, so INFPs are great. So you have to get more
ENFP.
cups. Sam's an ENFP. So, and
NFT. Got him.
That's funny.
Banned. Just kidding.
You have to get more cups, AJ. Yes. Well, here's the thing. We haven't talked about this yet, but once you have cups, changing your cups out is physically painful. Your brain does not know the difference between changing your mind and dying, right? If you've ever heard the word ego death, or the phrase, it means basically the same thing, because you identify, or most people are identified with their thoughts. Meaning, if I say, you could say, I live in America, I vote Republican, I think that immigration is bad or something. Those are different. But you say, I'm an American, I'm pro-Republican, I'm anti-immigration, then you've identified. You're saying, I am these thoughts, I am the cups, right? So when someone changes or tries to change the cup or attacks your cups, you treat it exactly the same way. There's no difference in your brain, as if somebody threatened your life, right? If you said Republicans are stupid to someone who says I'm a Republican, then that person is going to say, here, you're stupid, right? You're bad. And they're going to hear you in their head, just hold a knife up to them and say, you are a bad person, right? That's how the brain treats it when you attack people's conceptual framework. You attack their cups, right? So this is partially why it takes so long to change the world about things, because people are very resistant to change in the same way that they're very resistant to you threatening them with a knife. They don't know the difference. They, like, your brain, it's identical to them, because to them, they are the cups, right? If you get into like meditation and stuff, a lot of meditation is like, you are not your thoughts, disidentify with thoughts, ideas, opinions, beliefs, feelings, right? But that's hard, and people don't do that because it's hard, right? Um, so getting new cups is painful because growth is painful. Changing your cups is painful because psychological death is painful. Having someone try to change your cups is even more painful, because having someone threaten you with a knife is probably not the highlight of your day, right? So it's tricky, because if this is also partially where people can change themselves, but you can't change them, comes in, right? If you tell someone, hey, you should probably stop drinking every day because you're going to die, you're an alcoholic, you're not a fun drunk, whatever, then they feel like you're personally attacking them. I mean, you kind of are, but you know what I mean. So they will perceive that as a threat to their well-being, because obviously they don't have a problem with the drinking, or maybe they do, but they don't want you to tell them about it. On the other hand, if somebody says, I should probably stop drinking, I'm going to go to AA, right? Well, they're much more likely to do it than if you say, you should probably stop drinking, you should go to AA. We're having an intervention. You thought it was a birthday party, but actually we're just going to yell at you and tell you you need to stop because you're making your mom cry, right? So it's tricky. And I think this is the thing where Tesla didn't get this, where Tesla thinks, hey, I understand this, other people should understand it, it makes sense, it's the right answer. People don't care if things are the right answer, because to them, the right answer is what they already believe, because everyone else has, for their whole life, told them, we need to put more water in this cup, which you believe is correct, right? So it's very tricky. Nosebleed, like in Butterfly Effect, you're essentially pulling out their cup, fill it with your cup juice, and put it back. Cups for sale. Street epistemology. Lol fire. Good. Or low fire. Good shit, man. It's good
Read
shit. Be the change you want to see. Yeah, and so
epistemology.
ultimately,
Nice.
ultimately, to change the average person's mind, you actually have to change a lot of other people's minds first, and eventually you will have the momentum because everyone else is just trying to stay the same or benefit themselves, right? Change hurts, so most people will avoid change, and thus most people will be changed whether they want to be changed or not because they have not taken it upon themselves to be changeable or to seek change, right? So if I chose to be an alcoholic, and then the country banned alcohol, and they started like putting anyone that made alcohol in prison, which they tried this before. Um, they're going to change that for me, or maybe all of my friends decide to stop going to parties where we're drinking together, and then I go to parties myself, right? Well, you have the option to keep doing stuff alone, but most people are social, so they won't want to do that, and that can be effective, right? So yeah, yeah, addiction is complex. It's not specifically just related to conceptual stuff. There's a lot of things, emotional problems, childhood trauma, blah 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 blah. But so I feel like the spaces I'm in aren't exactly filled with normal people. How do I understand normal people better? They can be boring and hard to talk to. You should go get this book. I'm going to share the link in the chat. This book is amazing. I have a couple other ones that I'll share that are good on this topic as well. So um,
Guys, this has been an
yes.
awesome episode. Can we just get some love in chat for Garrett? Dude, he does this every week for free. Just comes in here and educates us.
Thank
It
you, sir.
is
Yeah,
one
I
of
enjoy
my
it.
favorite episodes, and I know it's some of y'all's favorite too. So some love in chat. Do that little react emoji. Spam the react. It's so cool.
Thank you, everyone. So that's a really good one. I'm going to say some other things that you can read that are definitely required reading in my book. 48 Laws of Power goes through and breaks down a lot of the higher level kind of social dynamics. It's a little bit more focused on like aggressive people and how that stuff works, but 48 Laws is really good. There's an article called The Gervais Principle, or a series of articles that talks about social dynamics through the lens of The Office. This is one of the best
Oh my
articles ever
gosh.
written.
I love that. That is definitely one of my
If you
favorite.
haven't read it, you must read that article. This is required shit. I have three, I think four now, but there are typically three books in my required reading. It's 48 Laws of Power, Gervais Principle, and the last one, which is called Geeks, Mops, and Sociopaths, which is from Meaningness. And this one talks about how subcultures exist. And it basically talks about the same thing. When a subculture starts, you have geeks who are interested in it because they're interested in it. As it grows, normal people who are called mops come in. And when enough mops are in the thing, then sociopaths descend and try and monetize it. So a good example of this would be D&D. Everyone for all of time has considered D&D to be a thing for nerds. Pretty much is. It's also very fun if you've never played it, but it is not a game for uncreative people. You have to. It will benefit you to be creative if you're playing it, but it's very fun. You have to kind of get into it, but now because Stranger Things had all the D&D shit, D&D is becoming more popular, and now it's acceptable socially to like D&D. Same thing happened with Star Wars. Star Wars used to be for nerds. Then Disney bought it. Now everyone's a Star Wars fan. It's exactly so. It talks about kind of how that works. Gervais Principle talks about power dynamics in an office setting, and they use the show The Office, so they go through all the people. Um, Basically, Gervais Principle says there are four kinds of people. Three of them matter. One of them they don't. I don't think they explain correctly. But you have clueless people, who's like Michael Scott and Dwight. They do not understand that there is a power game going on, and thus cannot play it or win at all. Um, they don't. They just don't understand what's going on. Right? They're just normal people in the mix. You have losers, who are people who do know there's a power game and could play it, but have lost the power game. This would be Jim. So Jim has a normal job just like Dwight does, but Jim clearly like can see that there's things going on, and he understands when Jim or Dwight or when Michael or Dwight are being idiots. Um, and then there are psychopaths who would be like David
Jan.
Wallace, Jan,
David
Diane
Wallace?
Lamb.
I don't know about David
They
Wallace.
use, yeah, well, because he knows how to play the power game. So I don't like their terminology, but you technically you could switch out psychopaths for socially savvy, and that would probably be a better word. But David Wallace knows how to play the game, right? He's clear, like he gets fired and then comes back. You know what I mean? So he's smart. Um, and then you have shepherds, which are people who are basically psychopaths that fight for the good. And that they say that's Toby. I think this is stupid. Personally, I just don't like how they explain it in the series, and they only touch on it at the end. But so again, here's the only catch: if you read all of these things that I just told you about, the autism one not so much, but those three things, they will probably fuck your emotional state up for a week. It's
Don't
depressing.
read it
You're
before
gonna think,
Don't read it before Christmas.
yeah, no, don't read it before you go hang out with your family.
Yeah, you're gonna overanalyze your whole family.
Yeah. So you'll before you know about the existence, all three of them. So 48 Laws is really bad, and then they're all three of those are going to make you really uncomfortable around people because you're going to start seeing some shit about how the dynamic works, and it don't use this shit for evil either. 48 Laws of Power tells you at the very in the intro, it's like um the other two are articles, Samantha. So I posted
I have them all. I'm putting them
both
in the
of those
top
articles.
clips. I'm putting all the articles in the top clips channel if you want to, and all the images. So 48 Laws of Power, if you can drop a link for that, Samantha, I'll put it in there too.
Yeah, it's also on sale, or at least it was. I got a copy for $12. It used to be like $25. So if it's on sale right now, you should get it. Great book. All of Robert Greene's books are good. He's got 48 Laws of Power, however many strategies of war, art of seduction, laws of human nature. Art of seduction and the strategies of war are okay. Those you can skip, but laws of human nature is really good. 48 Laws of Power is good.
What do you know about midi-chlorians?
What is it?
Oh man, that's the Star Wars force generating.
People were pissed about that, right? When that
yeah.
Okay.
Well, it was the changes that Disney made to the concept.
Yeah. I've got to run. Good talk, everyone. Have a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. If that's not your thing, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Festivus for the rest of us. So cool. Good talk.
We will. Thanks, Garrett. I guess Garrett's got to dip.
Yeah, I gotta go.
I wanted to just tell you guys we are going to have a Christmas party on the 30th, so make sure you put that on your calendar in the events. If you go over to the events page or the events tab up at the top left of our Discord, you can click on events and then do interested. Wacky Christmas sweater. We're going to give away Nitro for whoever gets voted the most wacky Christmas sweater or shirt. Yeah, that'll be fun time. Have some drinks, celebrate the new year with the fam. After you have some family time with your real family, come hang out with the Traba fam. We'll play some activities in here, some golf and stuff like that. Maybe poker night, have 2 or 3 rooms. There's a chess game, blazing eights. We'll do some fun stuff, and definitely check that out. You can even add it to your calendar. I don't know if y'all know about this, but there's a little like ... next to the events. If you click that ... you can click add to your calendar, Google, iCloud Calendar, Yahoo, if anybody uses Yahoo. But yeah, check it out. Hop in, join us. You don't have to stay for the whole time, but we'd love to see you. And the staff will all be there. It'll just be a merry, merry time for the new year to welcome it in. And that's it for today. Tomorrow's Marketing Club. We're going to be talking about updates on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, everything that you need to know for social media marketing, as well as Discord changes. The Snow's Giving stuff is happening right now, so you can go download the cool emotes and animations from the Discord page. I can drop that link as well, but definitely worth checking out if you're a community manager. And we are very excited for the Tribe of Gold and Tribe of Blue launch happening in January, so stay tuned for the exact day or date, but we are opening it up to a select few for early access. If you're interested in putting your business service on there as part of the discounts offered for Tribe of Gold, hit me up. We have a partnership application and we'll walk you through the process. We have to verify that the services are quality and et cetera, but if you get Tribe of Gold as well, we're going to have options for you to go through that process and list your service. So that is all for today. We'll catch you tomorrow and have a great week. Thanks, Tribe. Peace.